You've been silent, you've held your ground. Maybe you walked away with grace, maybe you stayed quiet when you wanted to scream, or maybe you typed out 100 texts and never hit send. And now, whether it's been days, weeks, or months, you're thinking of sending that message. The one that makes him stop scrolling. The one that makes him sit up and remember who you are. Not the version of you that begged, explained, or overthought, but the one who knows her worth. The comeback text isn't just a few clever words on a screen. It's a shift in energy. A signal that you're not the same person he left, ghosted, or took for granted. It's a quiet, powerful reminder that while he might have walked away from you, he'll never stop thinking about you. Because when it's done right, the right message doesn't just get a reply, it sparks an obsession. Let's talk about how to write that kind of message. The most powerful comeback text doesn't scream, plead, or even try to impress. It speaks from a place of calm confidence. It carries the kind of energy that says, I'm good with or without you. And that energy is magnetic. Most people make the mistake of reaching out from a place of lack. They want validation, closure, or answers. And because they want something from the other person, their message ends up giving away all their power. The text ends up looking like a fishing line, baited, nervous, hoping for a bite. But the kind of message that makes him sit up and obsess isn't needy. It's centered. It's calm. It carries dignity. And that kind of energy, that lingers in someone's mind long after the notification fades. When you send a message from this place, the words themselves matter far less than the energy behind them. Let's say you haven't spoken in a while and you want to re-enter his mind without it seeming desperate. A message like, saw something today that reminded me of you, hope you're doing well, is simple, unassuming, and confident. You're not asking for anything. You're not explaining yourself. You're just being real. You're sending a signal, I'm still here, I'm still thriving, and I'm not chasing you. That kind of message works because it creates curiosity. It makes him wonder, what did she see? Why is she texting me now? What is she thinking? You've planted a seed in his mind, and now his imagination takes over. Men aren't drawn to women who try to prove their worth. They're drawn to women who already know their worth. A comeback text is your opportunity to show that you've grown, not groaned, that you've reflected, not ruminated. It communicates that you've moved forward without needing to announce it. One of the best ways to do this is by keeping your tone light, playful, and just a little mysterious. For example, ran into that coffee place you used to hate. They still don't know how to make a decent espresso. It's personal. It brings up a shared memory, but it doesn't ask for anything. You're not telling him you miss him. You're not inviting him back. You're simply reminding him that you have history, that you remember, and that you're still moving through life fully awake and aware. There's another layer to this kind of message. It shows emotional intelligence. It proves you're not sitting in the past. You're not asking him to explain himself or relive old drama. You're not starting a conversation about the relationship. That's key, because nothing kills mystery faster than demanding answers. You don't want to rehash what went wrong. You want him to feel what he's missing. And he can only feel that if he senses that your life is already full. Not because you're trying to prove it, but because it genuinely is. Now here's what most people miss: timing. You don't send a comeback text when you're still in pain. You send it when you've genuinely found your peace. If you're still hoping he'll fix your heartbreak, don't message him yet. Because even if you say all the right words, the energy will betray you. Wait until you can smile at the memory instead of cry. Wait until you feel neutral or even grateful for the lesson. That's when your message will carry the most power, because you'll be reaching out from a place of overflow, not emptiness. And finally, the best part of sending a comeback text from this energy, you're not attached to the response. If he answers, great. If he doesn't, that's okay too, because the message wasn't about getting him back. It was about reclaiming your voice. It was about owning your story and showing up with maturity and magnetism. And that is the kind of energy that doesn't just make him reply, it makes him remember you long after the message disappears. When it comes to rekindling interest or sparking intrigue in someone who has pulled away, most people make the mistake of rushing to say something clever, emotional, or persuasive. But what actually captures a man's attention and gets him thinking about you, sometimes obsessively, isn't what you say, it's how he feels after reading what you say. And the truth is, the most powerful texts aren't long, dramatic monologues or attempts to explain how much you cared. They're simple, emotionally intelligent, and subtly remind him of the energy he lost when he let you go. That's where timing and tone come into play. And when you strike that perfect balance between warmth and distance, between familiarity and mystery, he doesn't just notice, he feels it. Think about what happens when you hear a song from years ago, a melody tied to a certain moment, a feeling, or a person. You're instantly transported. That's what the right text can do. It takes him back to the way he felt when things were exciting, effortless, and real. But here's the twist. Instead of chasing that memory, you remind him of it by embodying the woman he first fell for, or the woman he was too distracted to appreciate. You don't beg to be remembered. You make yourself unforgettable, simply by being grounded in who you are now. Let's say you're tempted to write something emotional, like, "I miss what we had," or "I don't understand what went wrong." Those may be honest feelings, but they shift the power away from you. Instead, you want to create a ripple, a moment that hints at who you've become since things fell apart. A message like, "Just saw someone wearing that hoodie you used to live in. Hope it's not still in rotation," is light, cheeky, and packed with subtext. It says, "I remember you, I'm doing well, and I can even joke about the past without bitterness." That kind of energy is incredibly attractive because it shows emotional maturity. You've processed what happened, you've healed, or at least started to, and you're not trying to rewrite history. You're simply reminding him that you're still out there, living, noticing, smiling. Men are often surprised when the woman they took for granted suddenly becomes emotionally unavailable. Not cold, not cruel, just calmly detached. That's the energy that makes a man second-guess himself. Not because you're trying to punish him, but because you're no longer carrying the emotional burden. You've handed it back. That shift is subtle, but profound. And the best comeback messages communicate that shift with clarity. It might be as simple as responding to a random message he sends with, "Glad you're doing well. Life's been good on my end too." It's respectful, brief, and most importantly, it's not thirsty. He'll read that and start to wonder, wait, is she over me? Is she actually happy now? That wonder is what begins the obsession. The truth is, you don't need to manipulate anyone to get them thinking about you. You don't need to write a script or follow a strategy that isn't authentic. You just need to reconnect with your value. When you write from that place, even a two-layer message carries the weight of your evolution. It says, "I'm not here to relive the past. I'm here to remind you what you lost." And not by listing your good qualities, but by simply being them in the way you speak, text, and carry yourself. It's also worth noting that silence can be just as powerful. Sometimes the best comeback text is no text at all. The longer he goes without hearing from you, the louder your absence becomes. And when you finally do say something, it has impact. It's like a movie that builds suspense. Every moment of silence increases the intensity. So when you finally show up with a message that's warm, poised, and indifferent to outcome, it hits harder. He feels the change in you. He senses the woman who once waited, hoped, or cried is no longer waiting. And that changes the game. So if you're thinking about sending that text, pause. Ask yourself, am I sending this because I miss him or because I'm centered in myself? When your message comes from peace instead of panic, it becomes more than a text. It becomes a statement, a quiet declaration that says, "I'm still here, I'm still me, but I'm not waiting anymore." That energy will stick in his mind long after your message is read. There's a unique kind of magnetism in unpredictability, specifically the kind that doesn't scream for attention but quietly holds it. When you become too predictable, too available, or too emotionally transparent, it becomes easy for someone to take your presence for granted. But when your energy shifts, when you stop responding the way you used to, stop always being the first to reach out, stop reacting the way he expects, you disrupt the emotional pattern he's become used to. And that disruption is exactly what triggers intrigue. Before he knew what to expect, you'd always answer quickly. You'd initiate conversations. You'd ask how his day went. Even if he didn't ask about yours, he knew you'd be there, reliable, consistent, emotionally generous. And while those are beautiful qualities in a partner, they can be weaponized against you when someone doesn't value them. The moment you decide to stop playing that role, not out of anger, but out of self-respect, you create a void, a shift, a question mark where there used to be a period. That's where obsession begins, not from you trying to prove something, but from you no longer trying. When he sends a message and it takes you hours to reply, or you don't reply at all, it doesn't make you petty, it makes you busy. It makes you unavailable. It makes you a woman who is clearly filling her life with more than the emotional labor of tending to someone who didn't know how to value her in the first place. And that contrast from who you used to be is striking. It makes him wonder, why the change? Who is she becoming now that I'm not her focus anymore? That curiosity pulls at him quietly but powerfully. It's not about playing games, it's about energy. When you constantly pour yours into someone who isn't meeting you halfway, you deplete yourself and teach them that your love doesn't need to be earned. But when you redirect that energy inward toward your goals, your friends, your peace, you don't even need to explain anything. He'll feel the shift. He'll notice the space. He'll start to pay attention to what he no longer has immediate access to. And in that space, respect can begin to rebuild. Not because you demanded it, but because you stop settling for less than it. There's something deeply attractive about a woman who no longer needs to prove herself, who no longer seeks validation from someone else, who doesn't need to say, look at me, I've moved on. Instead, she moves on so gracefully that it speaks volumes without a single word. That's what makes him think. That's what makes him stalk your stories, reread old texts, or wonder if you still care. The mystery of your silence, the confidence of your detachment, it hits differently than any long-winded message ever could. This isn't about manipulation, it's about emotional recalibration. You're not pretending not to care, you're simply shifting your investment. You're choosing not to give your emotional currency to someone who hasn't earned it. And as you do that, your value rises, not just in his eyes, but in your own. That internal shift creates an external presence that is magnetic. He may not even understand why he's suddenly thinking about you all the time, but it's happening. Because your energy has become rare, and in a world full of people trying too hard, there's something unforgettable about someone who's content without attention. The truth is, most men don't realize what they've lost until the emotional safety net disappears. When your affection, your attention, your consistent effort is gone, suddenly, they feel the weight of what they no longer have. And if he truly cared, even a little, that absence will haunt him more than your presence ever did. That's the power of pulling back, not to hurt him, but to reclaim yourself. This version of you doesn't over-explain, she doesn't chase, she doesn't need closure or validation. She knows that her energy is precious, and she protects it fiercely. And that version of you, that's the one he won't be able to stop thinking about. When it comes to captivating someone's attention long after the conversation ends, it's not about being the loudest or most charming in the room. It's about how you make them feel. The real secret to becoming unforgettable is presence. Not presence as in being there physically, but presence as in how deeply engaged, grounded, and unshakably authentic you are in the moment. That's what leaves a mark. That's what lingers in someone's mind after you've gone quiet. And the ironic part? The more rooted you are in your own energy, the less effort it takes to be remembered. Most people, when trying to make someone like them, put on a version of themselves they think will be more appealing, more agreeable, more entertaining, more accommodating. But this kind of performance never sticks because it's not anchored in truth. It might grab attention momentarily, but it fades quickly. What stays with someone, what really haunts their thoughts in the best possible way, is someone who had the courage to be completely themselves. Someone who wasn't trying to win them over because they knew their worth wasn't up for negotiation. That's the power of stillness. When you're calm in your energy, when you're not rushing to impress, when you're not clinging to the outcome, you create space, emotional space, and space is magnetic. It gives the other person room to be curious, to wonder, to lean in. When you're not anxiously filling the silence, when you're not reacting to every small thing, when you're just being fully, unapologetically, it creates a contrast to what most people experience every day. That contrast is what makes someone think about you long after you're gone. Think about it. In a world full of noise, someone who doesn't chase, doesn't explain, and doesn't seek approval stands out. It's not that she's cold, it's that she's composed. It's not that she doesn't care, it's that she's not trying to prove her value through over-effort. That kind of emotional maturity feels rare, and because it's rare, it becomes desirable. When a man senses that your happiness isn't dependent on his reaction, when he sees that your peace doesn't get shaken by whether or not he texts back, something in him recalibrates. Suddenly, it's not about whether you like him, it's about whether he gets to earn a place in your world. And here's where it gets even more powerful. When you're fully present and grounded in yourself, you say less but communicate more. You don't have to tell him how amazing you are. He sees it in the way you listen, in the way you hold eye contact without being desperate for it, in the way you can enjoy a conversation, share a laugh, connect deeply, and then walk away without needing to make it mean something. That's what sticks, because it's not common. And anything that's not common becomes unforgettable. You also set a tone without trying. If you carry yourself with dignity, if your standards are felt without you having to state them explicitly, it subtly teaches him how to show up around you. You're not asking for respect, you embody it. You're not demanding attention, you naturally command it. And that kind of energy shifts the dynamic entirely. Suddenly he's not just enjoying your company. He's thinking about you when you're not around, wondering what you're doing, curious about what's going on in that quiet confidence of yours. That's the energy that becomes the emotional equivalent of a scent that lingers on a sweater long after someone leaves. It's subtle, it's unforced, and it's strong enough to stay with someone even in their silence. That's how you make him obsess, not by trying harder, but by being more rooted in your own self-worth. Because when you're grounded in your value, you naturally create the kind of emotional experience that's hard to find and even harder to forget. When we talk about a comeback text that makes him obsess over you, it's not about being clever or manipulative. It's about striking a balance between strength and warmth, clarity and mystery. The right text, delivered with calm confidence, can remind him of what he lost or never fully appreciated without saying it directly. And the key to that kind of impact isn't in the actual words, but the energy behind them. It's in how you make him feel when he reads it. The fifth kind of comeback text has one goal: to remind him of the version of you he underestimated, and to do it in a way that is graceful, elevated, and undeniably self-assured. This kind of message isn't reactive. It's not about venting, proving a point, or trying to get a response. It's sent from a place of emotional detachment, not coldness, but clarity. You're no longer wrapped up in trying to change the past or control how he sees you. Instead, you're reflecting who you are now. And that's what gets under his skin. Because now, he's not just reading your words, he's feeling the distance that's grown between who you were when he last had access to you and who you are today. And that distance becomes haunting. Let's say he reaches out. Maybe he sends a casual, "Hey stranger," or a "Been thinking about you." These kinds of messages are vague on purpose. He's testing the waters, hoping you'll slip back into the familiar pattern. What you send back in this moment can either reopen the loop or close it with strength. If you want to shake him up a little, not out of revenge, but because he needs to be reminded that he doesn't get to drift back in casually, you answer in a way that's warm but impenetrable. That's something like, "Nice to hear from you, hope you're doing well." It's not mean, it's mature, and it sends the message, "I'm not angry, I'm just not where you left me." The power of this kind of comeback text is that it removes the emotional access he once had. He may have expected a flood of emotion, a nostalgic pull, or even a little flirty tension, but instead he gets calm, polished, elevated, and that rattles him more than any dramatic message ever could. He's left wondering, how did she move on so easily? Does she still think about me? Did I lose my chance for good? That's the beginning of obsession, not when you try to trigger it, but when you subtly reveal that you've risen above needing anything from him. Another variation of this kind of message works when he's being slightly more direct. Maybe he references the past or tries to revisit an old memory. Remember that night in the city? That was wild. Here, you don't dive into nostalgia. You acknowledge, but you elevate. It was a great memory. I've had a lot of beautiful moments since then too. That one sentence says everything. It acknowledges the past without living in it. It shows you've moved forward without bitterness, and it drops just enough intrigue to make him wonder what those beautiful moments were and who they were with. The real magic of this comeback energy is that it reflects growth. You're not stuck in the loop anymore. You're not reliving or rewriting. You're standing in who you are now, and you're offering a glimpse, but not full access. That's what makes him obsess, because men don't crave what's always available. They crave what feels rare. And there is nothing more rare than a woman who values herself enough to speak with grace, not desperation. A woman who no longer needs the closure she once begged for. A woman who shows that her peace is no longer negotiable. These texts don't say, look what you missed. They show it through elegance, through calm, through the absence of drama. They don't chase, but they don't push away either. They float. They carry an energy that says, you had access to me, you no longer do, and I've become someone even more extraordinary since. That kind of emotional presence lingers far longer than any angry paragraph ever could. It doesn't just make him remember you, it makes him rethink everything he thought he knew about you. And that quiet shift in perception is where obsession begins. When it comes to the comeback text that makes him obsess over you, the most powerful message you can ever send is sometimes the one you don't send at all: silence. The absence of a reply, the calm that follows chaos. In a world where we are constantly trained to respond, to explain, to defend, choosing not to engage can feel like a radical act. But here's what most people don't realize: silence carries weight. It's not passive. It speaks volumes, and in the right moment, it can echo louder than any well-crafted sentence ever could. When he reaches out after hurting you, disrespecting you, or slowly fading out of your life, he might expect anger, confusion, or even longing. In fact, he might be testing the waters just to see if he still has a grip on your emotions. But when you don't respond, when you let the message sit unanswered, you shift the dynamic entirely. It's not about punishing him. It's about showing, in no uncertain terms, that your peace no longer includes giving your energy to someone who didn't know how to handle it the first time. That's not cruelty. That's self-respect. Imagine this. He sends you a text that says something vague like, I miss us, or I've been thinking about you. It's non-committal, safe, and designed to stir something in you without requiring real vulnerability from him. In the past, you might have jumped at that, feeling flattered, nostalgic, or hopeful, but now you pause. And instead of giving him the response he wants, a gateway back in, you give him the one thing he never expected. And not the kind of space that comes from playing games. The kind that comes from healing, from elevation, from deciding that someone who walked away doesn't get to waltz back in with a lazy sentence and no accountability. Here's the thing about silence. It's not empty. It's filled with meaning. It creates reflection. When someone is used to you engaging, explaining, or even arguing, silence forces them to face themselves. It's a mirror, and what he sees in that silence isn't just you ignoring him, it's you choosing you. He sees that you've shifted, that you no longer need the validation his message once would have offered, that you've found peace that isn't dependent on his attention. And that realization, that's what shakes him. This is especially true if he was the one who left, thinking you'd wait. If he assumed you'd always be there, ready to pick up where things left off, your silence becomes a statement. It says, I've moved forward. I've filled the space you left, and I'm not looking back. That unsettles him. Not because you're trying to hurt him, but because he realizes, perhaps for the first time, that you were never waiting, you were growing. Men become obsessed with what they can't quite grasp, with what feels just out of reach. And when you don't answer that message, when you resist the urge to revisit the past or reopen that door, you become a mystery again, not because you're playing hard to get, but because you are actually hard to reach. Emotionally, mentally, energetically, you've raised the bar, and without saying a single word, you've sent the strongest message possible. You don't chase anyone who made you feel like an option. Silence also gives you your power back. When you don't engage, you're not playing a role in his story anymore. You're writing your own. You're not reacting. You're leading. And you're showing him and yourself that your energy is sacred, that your life doesn't pause when someone suddenly remembers your value, that your worth isn't up for negotiation based on a text, a memory, or a moment of loneliness on his end. So the next time he pops up with a late-night text, a vague compliment, or a subtle reminder of the past, ask yourself, does this deserve my attention? Is this message rooted in real change or in convenience? Because if it's the latter, and you know in your gut that nothing meaningful has shifted, then maybe the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Not out of spite, but out of strength. Because silence, when it's grounded in self-respect and not resentment, becomes magnetic. It creates space, it builds intrigue, and most of all, it protects your peace. It reminds him, and more importantly, it reminds you that your life is moving forward, that your heart is no longer a revolving door, and that the version of you he once knew is long gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and far more selective with her energy. At the end of the day, the comeback text that truly makes him obsess isn't about chasing or begging for attention. It's about reclaiming your power through your actions, or sometimes your deliberate silence. When you choose to prioritize your peace, set firm boundaries, and refuse to engage with anything less than respect and genuine effort, you transform the entire dynamic. You show that you value yourself above all else, and that you won't settle for anything less than you deserve. That's the kind of strength that commands attention, sparks real change, and makes him realize what he lost. So remember, your power lies not in the words you send, but in the energy you carry. And when you honor that, you don't just make him obsess, you make yourself unstoppable.